despite that Africa contributes less than 4% of the global greenhouse gas emission, but Africa is the most vulnerable to climate change impacts. Then there is opportunity gaps are also there for Africa towards 2050, building that kind of technology greenhouse economy, because there will be more job for people to take. Then climate urgency. Africa GDP could lose up to about 5% annually, even by 2030, that is just nearby now, from climate disruption, if we don't start addressing the net zero transition immediately. Furthermore, development dual mandate, indigenous tech imperative, and investment deficit are part of all that is necessary that must make us to look at net zero transition. Investment deficit shows that Africa received just 40 billion of the 2 trillion that was put in place in global clean energy investment in 2024. 40 billion is very small, just about 2% of the 2 trillion. And that is very ridiculous. The whole of Africa is given. So we need to look at where are we and where are we going. So where are we now in terms of net zero landscape? We can see that in terms of renewable capacity that is installed, just slightly above 71 gigawatts is what is available. Of the global greenhouse gases emission from Africa, like I said, 4%. But if you look at the fossil fuels that we use, is far higher than 50%, close to 57%. And so we have a lot to do in Africa to be able to bring down the use of the fossil fuel that we are used to. And that is where some of the challenges that we have in Africa that we need to start addressing. The next slide. What is in the global challenges? What are the global challenges? The dual pressure of industrialization versus decarbonization. There is that challenge of energy instability and capital development, skill gaps, weak institutions, decisions to be able to make things to work across the globe. Inconsistency policy. We don't have policy that the whole world will be able to adopt, because it varies from one continent to another. And of course, infrastructure deficits are also there. And all of these, one way or the other, they tilt, they skew towards Africa negatively. And that's why we must take the bull by the horn to make us to know what are we doing in our own case. What are the pillars? Next slide. What are the pillars of net zero transition for sustainability? I listed 5 of them: human sustainability, cultural sustainability, environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability. All of these are very key as the important thing that we need to look at if we must go towards net zero towards the mid of this century. Now, I want us to look at the overview of the net zero transition in some African countries. I give example of 4 countries here: Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and South Africa. Nigeria is targeting to be able to go to net zero transition by the year 2060. The Climate Change Act 2021 was one of the policy that was made, and we also have the ETP that was updated, which was made also in 2020, updated in 2024. Then Naseni there in Abuja has been on talking about solar energy doing some transition, so to say, CNG conversion, electric vehicle assembly. These are some of the indigenous things that we are having here. And the state where we are now is that the energy transition plan that was approved will need about $400 billion to be able to make us to kickstart and move on. And up till now, we are yet to be anywhere. In Kenya, Kenya is looking at net zero by the year 2050. And they, in terms of their indigenous technology, they have their geothermal, M-Copper, solar, pay as you go, and then also the carbon market development. They have over 80% renewable energy that they are using now, but they also will need about $170 billion to be able to go into the implementation of this. In South Africa, it might be slightly better. They are also looking at going to net zero transition by the year 2050. Indigenously, they have wind and solar IPPs, and then local content requirements they have around them, including green hydrogen pilot that they are doing. However, the largest African renewable energy investor, you can find it in South Africa as of today within the continent. Now, when you go to Egypt, Egypt is targeting 42% renewables by the year 2035, and they have not come up with when finally they want to get to net zero transition. However, they also have some indigenous technology that they are making use of, like the Bemberg Solar, Red Sea Wind farm, and MW that was commissioned last year. So all of these gives us some of the overview of what we have in Africa. Now, let's look at Nigeria's energy transition and the path to net zero in the year 2060. You can just look at those ones in the green there. We are looking at power to be able to generate 277 gigawatts by the year 2060. And then be able to have clean cook stove that will not involve fossil fuel. And then be able to have electric vehicles and CNG, vehicles using CNG around that time, and get away from fossil fuel. The industry as well need to come up with SMEs that are very efficient, that everyone will be able to rely on at small scale level. And then oil and gas we have gas that's going to bridge the fuel, like I've been saying. All of this will require that we are talking about bringing up a capital of about $500 billion by the year 2060, and $686 billion will be saved in terms of fuel that we are using currently now, if we can get to that level. And then about 840,000 jobs will be created, and then we can then be talking about working towards the year 2060. The next slide. So, African Green Imperative Focus. We talk about the goal, the transition to net zero without compromising industrial growth or energy security. We look at the strategy, the pillars. These are very important as the focus for us to go green towards the mid of this century. Now, what are the indigenous green technologies in Africa? I listed 3 of them that I want us to look at. Some of the key areas of the indigenous green technologies include agriculture and water management, waste management and circular economy, then renewable energy and habitat design. Agriculture water management is the first one that I listed 3 things here. The ZA pit farming, which is being practiced in Burkina Faso and Niger, where traditional dry land technique is extensively being used to, in a way, to be, with organic manure, to be able to get rehabilitate the land so that the land will be able to get enough nutrients. Then we have the stone bonds also, or lines being used in some other areas, some other places in West Africa here. They use oil conservation such that rows of rocks and are strategically placed to slow surface runoff so that erosion will not take away important places. And this, they use it, some of places even in Nigeria here, in the middle belt, is commonly being used. And then we have indigenous rainfall harvesting, whereby in some places like Namibia, we have ancient subterranean and surface catchment systems, which are being used to provide water irrigation for agriculture. The next one, out of the three I mentioned, is what waste management and circular economy. And two are listed here: biological pollution control and organic manure and agroforestry. And the third one is renewable energy and habitat design, where we talk about passive buildings, where our traditional African architecture, they use local materials, earth-based materials, such as mud bricks and thatch, to be able to regulate the temperature that the house will be able to conduct, so that you will not have too much heat. And that already we see it in our villages. The indigenous biomass innovation, the localized zero production waste model across regions like in Nigeria. Innovators are converting renewable plants based fibers into sustainable biodegradable alternatives to synthetic manufacturing materials. This is becoming common gradually now, where this is being used. So we look at all of this and we want to understand indigenous technologies that might be of great use in our industries. What are the areas of application where we'll expect our industry to begin to look at? The first one is local material science, where they need to start looking at using volcanic ash or agricultural waste in cement production to lower carbon footprints. Then in thermal management, they need to revive ancient agricultural cooling techniques, which I just mentioned, for industrial warehouses to reduce heating, ventilations, and air condition that consume so much energy. And then energy sourcing. We need to scale down and decentralized microgrids using local biomass, small-scale hydro tailored to rural industrial hubs. All of these are areas that our industry will need to begin to look at, to be able to use indigenous materials to get to do some of these things, rather than waiting on every time on things that you have to power by fuel. The conceptual framework for indigenous green technology. There are 4 tiers here. The technology researched, adapted, or manufactured locally by African scientists. We need to look at what can be done locally. So tier 1 say locally adapted, rather than depending on the West. Then tier 2 talk about locally assembled, then locally manufactured, and locally invented. All of these is the way our industries will need to begin to think. I've had talks today where you want to import or you want to bring in experts from India or from there or there. We need to begin to think inwardly, what are the things that are available here that we can use within Africa and within Nigeria that can make us to be able to do the same thing that we are getting from the West. Now go on to energy management and safety towards net zero. We have talked of IoT today. Efficiency in the first fuel. Efficiency is the first fuel, excuse me. So we cannot reach net zero by simply switching power source. We must manage what we have first of all by ensuring that those things that we have already, we are changing or we are moving gradually from what we have to what new things we want to bring in through our indigenous technology. So the IoT enable leak detection is very important, so that we'll be able to say that the carbon that we want to get rid of is also not hampering some other places. Then indigenous AI, developing local algorithms that predict the peak load demands based on African market cycles rather than European templates. Then safety and protection, transforming to green refrigerants and non-toxic industrial cleaners derived from local flora. These are some of the things that we need to start looking at. There are 4 phases that we want to look at as roadmap to net zero transition in Africa. So I'm starting with the roadmaps now. The phase 1 is the optimization. In the optimization, the first one, this is the foundation phase. We cannot decarbonize a wasteful system, which is common in Africa. The cheapest and cleanest megawatt is the one that has never been used. So we need to take action. What are those actions? We need process integration, indigenous insulation, and operational safety. These are very important that we need to take action on them. Implementing heat exchanger networks is very important. In food processing or chemicals, cold streams, we need to ensure that we take care of the process integration. Then the indigenous insulation, we need to use local materials such as agricultural fibers and clay husk to be able to do our piping as insulation to prevent thermal loss. And also operational safety is very important. In phase 2, fuel switching and decentralization. This is the transition stage. We need to take action in terms of solid fuel transition by moving away from coal to torrefied biomass and be able to change much dependence on coal that is creating more carbon in the atmosphere. Then developing an on-site anaerobic digester using industrial organic effluent to create biogas is two of these 2 actions are necessary for us to switch from the current type of fuel that we are using and be able to get onto a net zero transition in the continent. Then in phase 3, the circular green economy. This is the systemic phase where decarbonization is very, very important. I said here that decarbonization isn't just about energy. It's about the carbon embedded in the materials. We need to bring it down or take it out completely. And we need to take these actions as listed. Material substitution. For example, we need to replace the traditional Portland cement, which is highly chemical, by using local clays. This will reduce the carbon dioxide emissions at least by up to 40%. Then industrial symbiosis is very important, establishing resource exchange networks. And then natural based sequestration, planting industrial forests around factories, or we move our factories to the forest and make them to be able to take over the whole place. that will be able to create green, making Africa to be green, and that will reduce greatly the amount of carbon that is being transferred into the atmosphere as we go into that one. And then finally, phase 4, the advanced technology that gets us to net zero. And this is called the end phase, solving the hard to abate sector, be it steel or cement or heavy transport. All of these are the ones that are throwing carbons into the air and is affecting the climate. So we need to take action. Looking at green hydrogen and then also carbon capture and utilization, ensuring that we throw into the place utilizing world-class solar irradiation to power the PM electrolyzers, and that is hydrogen replacing cooking coal in steel production. And then also, instead of storing carbon underground, African industry can capture the carbon dioxide with flue gases and combine with green hydrogen to create synthetic e-fuels or mineralize into building blocks, and that will help a great deal. Now, the roadmap, safety and sustainability interface. Here we are looking at decarbonization is a comprehensive safety strategy that African industry will need to look into and start going in that direction. Decarbonization is a safety strategy. It brings a good health protection, resource protection, and also it helps in policy and leadership, as this will help also be able to move towards net zero in 2060. Then green economy and indigenous circularity, where we are looking at agro-industrial linkages, that's utilizing cassava peelings and sugarcane bagasse for biofuel production, reducing reliance to imported heavy fuel oil, then e-waste mining, localizing recovery of rare earth metals from discarded electronics, like what we see around. You see all those malams picking all the ions and metals here and there. We need to recover them again and turn them to what can be useful into batteries and so on and so forth. The natural carbon sinks, integrating industrial zones with indigenous reforestation, such as bamboo forest and the rest of it. Let's skip this one. I want to come to action plans. Can you skip that? Skip this next one. Yeah. The action plans I have here is talking about what the government, the industry, and the civil society will need to work together. It is important that everybody must get involved. The civil society and communities are brought into here. It's not everything about industry or about industry. Yes, the government has the part to play, the industry has their part, and then the civil society, they also have their own part. Otherwise, we will not achieve the net zero transition that we are talking about. So the government must be able to enact enabling legislation and be able to ensure that this is followed closely, and also make funds available, while the industry will invest on local manufacturing, such as solar, EV, electric vehicle, clean cook stove, battery storage, and so on and so forth, and also be able to adopt science-based emission reduction that will be able to bring down the carbon that goes into the air. Now, while these two arms are doing their part, the civil society must integrate indigenous ecological knowledge into adaptation planning by accepting those things into our places, into our areas, into our homes, into the community. And then also champion women led energy cooperatives and community to be able to come to accept what is being given. I still have more in the next slide. The government still have more things to do, but more importantly, in the process of doing all this, the government must come to recognize much of what the industry are doing. So the government must come to the term that they must create preferential procurement for indigenous green products, reform DR regulations to enable community scale solar and storage, and then align all infrastructure investment with NDC, that decision taking, and then LEDS pathways that is being taken. When all of these are put in place, then it's going to make a little bit of life easier for our industries. So a lot has to be done from the government end, and that we should expect. When that is done, then we can expect the industry to do their own part, and then the community also their own part. The next slide. I have 3 horizons here of the action plan frame for net zero transition. Horizon 1 is operational efficiency and safety and monitoring, and that can be done in a short term. But in a medium term, we need to look at the infrastructure and fuel switching, microgrids, biomass, renewable hybridization. But in the long term, we look at this horizon as the end goal for full circularity and green hydrogen. And this we need to look at as part of what is expected for us to be able to move towards the net zero transition in Africa. What are the implementation plans? The short term, the medium term, and the long term action. In the short term action, energy audit. We need to audit all our energy and see how much are we actually using. I'm sure that often at times the system breakdown is here, that system has collapsed, power has collapsed, or whatever they call it, the grid has collapsed, because most industries, they have left using the PACN, and those who are able to generate their own power, how far have they been able to go? Who knows how much they use? So there should be need for energy audit, predictive maintenance, using IoT or AI, as we have discussed here this afternoon, condition monitoring, and then be able to talk about the outcome between 10 to 25% energy reduction if we can. This is what we should look at and do within the next in the short term, within the next 1 or 2 years, if at all we are working towards net zero in Africa. Then in the medium term, we need to do training, automation and enable system, and industry academia collaboration. The triple helix is very important for the government, the industry, and the academia to come together. This has not been working well. While government will be looking at the academia or the universities, the industry will be looking on government. So government and industry are working one side, government and university are working one side. Not the 3 of them are not working together, and that's where we have been having challenges in the country, Nigeria, for example, which is different from some other countries, like I know in Kenya or in South Africa. Then in the long-term action, local manufacturing has to come to full force. Circular economy system is important, and waste recycling and life recycle extension is also very key. So technical safety and protection plan We need to look at localization of standards, hazardous waste management, and protection of assets. These are very important that we need to look at when we are talking of technical safety. Otherwise, we might run into another problem while we are trying to shift from the problem of carbon. The pathway forward. As I begin to wind down, the pathway forward. The pathway forward is we need to look at the resilience system that work even when the global supply chains fail. The relevance, technology that use what we have in abundance rather than depending on what we want to import. And then the responsibility, a commitment to safety and the protection of our unique ecosystem is very important. So we need to take the bull by the horn by ensuring that we put some commitment to safety and protection. So the takeaway for net zero transition for African industry, there is urgent need for substantial government support for it before it can work. Beyond policy support, tax credits and subsidies are necessary for government to give to the industry, energy efficiency standards, and IP protection. Next is dedicated industrial funds to support indigenous technology integration transition programs. Solar, small hydropower, biomass energy, focus on local engineered system. Then also diversifying economic opportunity, collaboration with relevant agencies. All of these are what we need to put in place or ensure that it's working in our system. So in conclusion, I conclude that for Africa's green industrial revolution, we must start with indigenous ownership. By doing what? The stakes are non-negotiable. There are 118 million Africans estimated that are facing extreme weather even by now as we move towards 2030, and energy poverty affects about 600 million. You can attest to that even in several places in Nigeria and in West Africa where they don't even have access to energy as to be able to do the minimal thing that they need to do. Now Africa can define its own pathway. The world needs Africa's green transition to succeed, and Africa needs its own institutions, capital and technology to lead it. So we need to begin today. Technology must be owned, not just using technology. Often at times, or up till now, we've been using technology. We need to own technology in Africa. In Abuja, for example, Naseni has solar park. Kenya has geothermal innovation. So we need to own innovation. We need to own technology of our own. We need to leverage on indigenous technology for sustainability. And of course, finance is the binding constraint. We need Nigeria, I talked earlier, they need 400 billion to be able to take off. Africa needs $1.3 trillion per year in climate finance by the year 2030. And net zero is very important and it's an industrial opportunity. So I close with this. A pathway to net zero transition by 2050 is only possible when Africans take the bull by the horn and look inwardly to redeem themselves. Thank you.
Please put your hands together for Professor. Please bring that quote. I want everyone to see it. It's important. A pathway to net zero transition by 2050 is only possible when what? So ask your neighbor, are you ready to take the bull by the horn? So it depends on you, it depends on me. Once again, please celebrate it for me. Thank you very much, Professor. That was a very lovely one, I must say. Alright, so before we go further in our presentation, does anyone have a question for him? Okay, alright, sir. Professor, please hang tight so that we can respond to this appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Please, can you share Nigeria's latest carbon footprint?
Sorry, I don't have it here.
You don't have it?
Yeah, I don't have it here.
Does it account for what percent of the global?
Oh, okay. The percentage, I think it's about 8%.
8%?
For the global, yes.
Nigeria?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, very high.
As at when?
As at 2024.
Then the global average is what?
The global average, no, it's the global average of the carbon, right?
Yes.
Or what are you asking? For the carbon?
The carbon footprint for
Yes, that's what I'm saying, yes.
The global average.
Is it not about 68%?
And Nigeria is 8%.
No, 8% of that 68%.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 8% of that 68%. You know, if you take the whole thing as 100%, the 8%, Nigeria is accounting for about 8% of the carbon footprint.
Okay.
In fact, the whole Africa is about 16% or 16%, yes. I checked this morning because
How does that translate to total green energy emission?
you know that there are a lot of carbon that's being thrown into the air across the globe. But most of it is not from Africa. But the impact of it is on Africa.
Okay.
The impact of it is on Africa. That is why Africa is the one that is receiving the brunt of it. But we are lucky on this side because our weather is a bit better in terms of solar, in terms of energy, in terms of the sun. Okay. So, but even then, we still be the one that is accepting all of those carbon dioxide in our sides.
Why? Convention?
Well, maybe because they try to put much of their industry to this way. Okay. I wouldn't know, yeah.
Now, how does it justify the $400 billion if we have that percentage against the global? Is it a viable venture looking at where we are in Nigeria in terms of development? Do you think it's wise to budget such a huge amount?
Well, you know that when we are talking about all this money we are talking now, like you said, just budgeting. But then everybody is still going to pull from the global budget, the global fund. Everybody goes back to World Bank. Yeah. So it's not Nigeria that's going to raise the money, but that's why I said they are giving the whole of Africa 40 billion as at 2024, and they are planning for 2 trillion, which is just 2% they are giving to Africa. In my slide, I mentioned it. Okay. So, but for Nigeria to be able to work towards 2050 and get to net zero transition in 2060, we are planning for 400 billion to be able to use by then. 2060 is still far, even though it's close by. It's still far, but it's close by. And you know that these figures, as we move closer again, they will raise the figure. Usually they will raise the figure. The figure was not as much as 2 trillion before. So it's in 2024 agreement DC that they come about the 2 trillion, of which 40 billion dollars was allocated to Africa.
So how is the budget shared? Is it allocation or what?
Well, it's not allocation. It's they look at it. Okay, like you are like we all know. They look at what each continent be able to, or each area be able to contribute not in terms of money, in terms of what they can offer, what they can give, what they can produce. So they still look at Africa as if we don't have the resources, we don't have the brain, as if we don't have the brain to be able to do so much. Whereas from what we have all discussed here this morning, whereas it is we Africans that are even helping them over there to be able to do most of the things that they are doing. But because they have the facilities, they have created the facilities for themselves. Don't let me say because they have the facilities. They have created the facilities that make the things easier for them to be able to operate. So those facilities created will definitely got more money, and they don't want to invest that kind of facilities, invest that kind of money to create such facilities in Africa. That's why Africa must look inward and use what we have to be able to create what we need. And that's where we are missing it. We keep on depending on the West, and we are even going to the East now. Go to China, and we are depending on them. Everything around now is Chinese. And so we need to check inwardly what are the things that we have in Africa to be able to get ourselves back on track and be able to compete globally. Thank you.
From your studies, do you think it's encouraging the way we are going now?
Well, I think it's encouraging. Otherwise, we'll be able to compete globally. I think so. Otherwise, if you want to live, you want to look at it in another way, we might be left behind again, and then we now discover that we end up to be the one losing. I think we just have to compete with whatever is going on in the world. But we need to look inwardly and use what we have. It's what happens is that what they have is what they use, and if they see anything good in our place, they come and take it over there and use it. But what they have taken from here, we don't use it, and that's where our challenges are. That's how our challenges are. How come that some years back, or even up to now, you take crude oil from here and go and refine and bring back? Why? It's because we don't value what we have here. Why can't we find a way of refining it here and encourage the indigenous technology to be able to grow? Rather, we bring it down, we frustrate it, and the thing did not work. And these are some of the challenges, and that's the story all about looking at where is the world going. We better focus on it and follow them, but do it in our own way. Because very soon now they are already leaving us behind. Very soon now they are moving to electric vehicles, and before you know what is happening, your oil will become a waste. It will not be useful. So the fuel you are making noise about, people will not use it again. So you follow them and make use of where they are going. Look at what we have here that can do exactly the same thing. That's the only way. Otherwise we will be wasting our time and just remain Africa of the 2 centuries ago, 18th century or 19th century.
So as it stands now, what is the most crucial action you think should be happening now in Nigeria? What do you think we should be looking at now?
What we should be looking at now in Nigeria is for our industries, working with the academia and the government itself to be able to support them, is to look at the raw materials we have, how we can convert them to energy that will devoid of carbon. That's what we should be looking at now. That is just all my presentation. That's all my presentation is talking about. So we need to look at what are the raw materials, starting from the plants, waste plants, all the fertilizers that we have. What can we do to be able to convert them so that it will give proper energy, which cannot be used in various forms. And these are the things that drives industry. Without the energy, they cannot.
Okay, now is the biomass you are talking about.
Biomass I'm talking about. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Again, I'd like us to please put us together for Professor for taking time to respond to those questions. And unofficially, I wasn't sent this, but I want to use my veto power as the host of the event to also take this time to appreciate a wonderful, I don't know if it's an engineer or a doctor or professor. Your questions, engineer are great. Your questions have been a piece of masterclass since yesterday. Each time you ask questions from the speakers, the way you ask it, the intelligence in it, it makes super sense. And I can say it's actually a piece of masterclass. Let's celebrate it once again for me. Thank you for asking those questions. We are grateful for it. Thank you. Alright, so before Professor leaves, I want to again bring up my lovely, awesome, intelligent MD and my very resourceful and instrumental team member. He's been very much with me on stage, improvising and making prompts. Ekene Okucha for the presentation. Yes, please celebrate them as they come. It's important. Thank you.
All right, thank you so very much.
Okay. Thank you, Prof, for the insightful presentation and quite educative too. We as VCR, we believe so much in indigenous technology. I think I need to mention here, for some of the materials we use, for this exhibition, we actually did them ourselves, like the fabrication of the exhibition stands and even many other items we used. Yeah, we could have imported, but we thought it that, it's easier because we have a company that does that internally, so it's easier for us if we think and do it, and which we did. So on behalf of Veteran Concepts, we present this to you. We thank you for your participation and we look forward to having you again in the future. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, MD, sorry, before you leave, could you please come back? So sorry. I noticed since yesterday you've been having short with the speakers, and I've been speaking too, if you think about it. So it's also good to have so please, cameraman, the MD, you should go for that. Alright, engineer sir, could you please step forward? Yeah, let's. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. All right, it's been the RReliability Africa 2026 International Exhibition, Conference and Workshop. We began yesterday with a lot of speakers and delegates, and our speakers have dealt much on different scientific, engineer and industrial topics set for them, and they've delivered excellently well until today, and without doubt, it's been a very resourceful moment with all our speakers, and we equally wish that our delegates were still here till now. I wanted to take my time to personally, appreciate them for their time and resourceful input that they had during this moment. But then, no matter how good or how lovely any conference could be, it has to come to an end. Is that right? This is being said unofficially. Thank you to all our speakers, all our sponsors, all our delegates, all our exhibitors for all their resourcefulness, their input, their resources and their time. We are super grateful to you. And to officially close this particular conference for today, I'm going to be welcoming again on stage, like I did yesterday, this lovely, awesome guy. Like I said, I've been hammering this since I started the event today. He's been very resourceful to me. Anytime I need anything, I go to him. Ekene, what do we do? Say, we do like that, we do like this, and it's very awesome. Please celebrate him again, once again, celebrate him for me. Ekene Okocha, come on, smile. Thank you. So for the vote of thanks, he's going to have the floor.
Alright. Thank you, MC Ayo. It's been nice meeting you and also working with you as part of the team. So on behalf of the organizers of this great occasion, RReliability Africa Workshop and Exhibition 2026 edition, I officially want to thank each and every one of us for being part of this great occasion, the speakers, distinguished guest speakers, delegates, and every person from every walks of life who have also supported us, and also our vendors and our partners who have been here. We want to sincerely thank you and appreciate you for gracing this occasion for 2026. And also we look forward having this and so many other time to come from next year 2027. We want to say thank you, and by this time we'll be drawing the curtain for this great occasion and workshop and an exhibition for 2026. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you, thank you. We are so grateful for having you.
Well, it's needful. I also say thank you to my media crew. I mean, they've been the one, Ends has been on there giving those speakers the slides. You know, if they were not there, I'm afraid the slides wouldn't have worked. So I'm thankful to the media crew.